All right. Welcome to what we're going to call Lorecast Episode 1. I'm your host, your reluctant host this evening, Casey at Anubis God, and joining me is your other reluctant host,
Tom at Dartblade98.
We've effectively cut Johnny at Dr. Awesome completely out now. It's just going to be...
He's done.
We're running the duo show here. It's a coup. We've taken over. And today's episode of Lorecast is going to be asking you the question, what you know about Qliphoth, haters?
It's nothing.
The answer is nothing. You don't know anything about Qliphoth, and that's why we're doing this, to let you know. Alright, so let's say, Tom, that you've got a character idea, and you're considering using the Qliphothic with it.
Well, Casey, what I would do is stop right there and not use it.
That is good advice. Don't use Qliphoth, ever, for anything.
I think there may be a few exceptions, but honestly, I think even just without us even explaining anything, I think just don't use it anymore. It's overplayed in-game and in roleplay.
It's not... Qliphoth is not hell. Qliphoth is not Hades, it's not Tartarus, it's not Chinaland, it's not anything.
It's not Chinaland.
What it is... I don't remember the names of the Chinese hells, okay? They have weird names.
That's true.
The point is, it's the antithesis of reality. You have creation, and then you have anti-creation, and that's destruction, I guess, and that's Qliphoth. Don't use it. Nobody can use it without going nuts and dying, basically.
Right. That's really the main thing. I think you see a lot of people use it in character, and they're using it as some kind of demon realm.
For hell. They're using it as a substitute.
But they're using it because they're like, oh, it's edgier than hell, it's cooler, it makes you go crazy. Whilst it's similar, it is not an exact, I don't know, you can't completely compare it to Lovecraftian things. There are similarities, but it's really not quite the same.
Right. And so therefore, just as a precursor before we get into any actual information, all information here is given so that you understand why we're telling you don't use it. This isn't so that you know more about it so you can use it. This is so that you know more about it so you understand why it is wrong to use it.
I'd also say that this is probably the only Lorecast where we will be telling you not to use something entirely.
That's true. This is about the only one, and hilarious that it is the first one. But
yeah,
this is probably the only one where the entire Lorecast will be about something that we don't want you to use anymore.
Exactly. Okay, so, as we said, it's not a hell. Well, I suppose you could say it's hell in the sense that it's unpleasant. It is not a hell in the sense that it is a realm. In terms of dimensions, it exists beneath, as in behind, all the other dimensions, or just very far to the side, is the way it's described. It is not in line with everything else. It doesn't really exist in the same way. It's basically beneath everything. If everything was on a horizontal line, Qliphoth is just like way down below everything. And as to what it actually is, it's basically the sinkhole of the multiverse, where decaying universes decay into there.
Yeah, Qliphoth is a universal graveyard. It's where they go to die. And I don't want to say recycled, but they just fade away.
Right. And so it's literally the entire the realm itself is just to do with, well, it's the opposite of life. Everything in there is just the antithesis to everything else in the multiverse, which is, for all intents and purposes, alive and real. So even demons, hell, demons don't like Qliphoth, because that it is not...
It's still against them.
Yeah.
They exist, it is unexistence.
Mm-hmm. Right. I guess it's parts of it, or maybe the whole thing is the Shining Darkness. And it's called that. That's another name for the Qliphothic realm. Because darkness well, for one thing, the whole realm is basically pitch black. It's shades of black, which in itself doesn't really make sense.
It doesn't have to, though. It's crazy.
Exactly.
And any light that you bring in there actually detonates.
Right.
As if it wasn't explosive.
Because in this dimension, darkness is basically a kind of radiation. Not in a literal sense, so you can't scientifically explain that, really. But you can't go there without this quote-unquote radiation affecting you. And also, you can't go there anyway. It's difficult to get there, for one thing.
For example, I know people are going to bring up the Demon Flame that we get to go to in-game. It took Luther Black like 10 years to stabilize.
Way longer to do that, and it's not even the real thing. It's basically a construct of his that makes it habitable.
Right, because as you notice at the end of Aftershock, spoiler warning, the Kings of Edom they sort of repurpose that. They destroy it.
Right.
Because it can't exist forever. It can only exist for so long, and then it has to be recycled back into the realm.
Okay, so what's in there, I suppose, is something, again, people get very mixed ideas. People talk a lot about Qliphothic horrors, and it's like, okay, there are things in there. There are entities. You can't really say they're alive, because, again, the entire realm is just the opposite of life. The bits that I imagine are basically physically palatable, but they're basically angular masses. There are cubes, squares. I can't think of the proper term for them.
Monoliths?
Yeah, monoliths. Things that's what everything is. It's these angular shapes, planes, and they just float there. And they rise and they move like there's no gravity. And there are things the book describes as things between them that move, that flop, that writhe. Things you can't really see. And then every now and then there are sort of humanoid statues made of something that looks like ash. And then you've got the same kind of unrecognizable creatures in like their eyes, basically. In the eyes of these statues.
Right, so the Q horrors, again, going back to the game, the Qliphothic horrors that you run into are not actually residents of Qliphoth. They're things, people, members of Demon, whatever, that have been mutated, and therefore worship the Kings of Edom in that specific area.
Mm-hmm.
But entering Qliphoth, you're not going to run into Q horrors. They're just not a thing.
No, not like that. If you were going to find things you just couldn't comprehend. I suppose that's the only kind of bit where it compares to something like Lovecraftian. It's things that you can't see properly, things that just shouldn't be.
Non-Euclidean geometry, weird stuff that is possibly existing in dimensions beyond what the human mind can comprehend. And so therefore you can't, looking at them, by the very act of it, would slowly drive you mad. Because your brain is trying to process it and can't.
Mm-hmm. And then, so, you got these things, and this is really one of those things that I think people miss. People have characters that are people possessed, by Qliphothic energies or entities. The Qliphothic entities do not possess people. I don't think they're capable of doing that. But that might be me reading a bit differently, but even if they did, they would not be a hero. They would be a monster in every sense of the term.
If a Qliphothic entity possessed somebody, they could never be a hero, because Qliphoth is, again, the antithesis of everything. So there would be no reason for them to want to preserve anything. They would want to destroy it. B, a Qliphothic entity could probably not be in a body for that long.
It would, in all likelihood,
break down.
Yeah, it would just disintegrate the body. Now, when it comes to Qliphothic energy, which is this darkness radiation, if you go into the Qliphothic, if you're exposed to it somehow, so say if you've got someone who hangs around that portal down in downtown, just every day, because, why not? I want to have sandwiches by it. It's beautiful. I don't know.
to them.
Yeah. The radiation permeates you, and it does, in a very loose sense, possess you, in the sense that it replaces everything in your body with this unlife. It's not like you're dead, it's just like, it's an energy that's just completely the opposite of everything. And it takes over your body and repurposes it. And usually, if you're in the Qliphoth realm, you just then become this indistinguishable mass of whatever. And it doesn't matter anymore. And if you came back, you would pretty much just be damaging everything around you, because that's the effect this radiation has on anything that's real or alive.
Yeah, so it's not something that you can really use for characters, because the Qliphoth, in the game, it almost sort of gets labeled as like a hell dimension, which it really isn't. It's hell in terms, I know this isn't a very awesome statement, but sometimes hell can be used for good things. It can be used, you can harness the energy, you can do whatever. Qliphoth can never be used for something good.
Right,
it just can't.
You can't channel Qliphothic energy, for example, to use magic. You can't tap into the Qliphothic realm to use magic. Because that in
magic
itself
doesn't exist there.
Right. It would either destroy you or everything around you, just trying to use something from there. And then people might give the example of people from Demon. Demon, as a group, for the most part, do not realize that their organization is actually working towards this Qliphothic goal, basically, for the most part. Higher up members do. And then you give the example of Luther Black. Luther Black sacrificed something like 60% of his body just so he could accomplish the things he's already accomplished. He doesn't have eyes, he doesn't have, like, a lot of organs. He has to live on life support. And he is also just ridiculously powerful. Like, he has just gone through so much that has made him so powerful, and he still can only just maintain some modicum of control over Qliphothic powers.
He's one of the most powerful magi, basically,
right.
And he can barely influence Qliphoth.
Right.
Barely.
Yeah, and even then, he's evil in every sense of the term, and he uses it in the sense that the only way it can be used, which is to destroy things. Which is
right.
His ultimate goal would end in the destruction of the Earth, basically.
It would end in the destruction of everything.
Right. Because he wants to become a king of Edom. And
speaking of kings of Edom...
That led quite nicely onto there.
Demon in particular wants to free 5, and those are the 5 that you see in-game.
Right.
There are feasibly more than those 5.
It makes it sound like there are more in the books, but it specifically talks about these 5, which are mentioned in a book called the Liber Terribilis, which is the harrowing book.
Which you can also read excerpts of in the game itself. You can find them around.
Yeah. There's the Queen Beyond the Pale, the Master of All Sorrows, the Muse of Lethargy and Despair, the Heart in Man's Dementia, and the King of Lost Hope.
Which you should all be very familiar with, because...
You get to play as an avatar of one of them.
See, and then, okay, so I know that we said people can't be possessed by Qliphothic energy. And then somebody's like, but what about the end of Aftershock? Spoiler warning. Where you get possessed by a king of Edom. Again, those are avatars of the kings that are humanized because of where they are.
Mm-hmm.
They're humanized because Luther Black made that dimension. And so therefore they're able to influence humans without necessarily tearing them to pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see that the kings of Edom actually show up, they just destroy everything. They're
right,
it's
just that black mass, yeah. That's basically what the Qliphoth looks like. That, and the instance in Burial Cave, where you fight Necrol, right at the end you look through that door and there's just cubes. That's what Qliphoth is. That's what it really looks like.
Right. So I guess it's not entirely... You can, if you're a mage, you can draw on it. But everybody says it's a bad idea. Everyone.
It's the fact that you're just even tapping into it is detrimental to the world.
Yeah.
And that's why you don't see no hero in lore draws on it at all. For good reasons. Very good reasons.
Even witchcraft draws from the Netherworld.
Right.
But she never draws from Qliphoth.
because she either couldn't or wouldn't ever even consider thinking of wanting to.
Even Thrakiel wants to make a war between heaven and hell, but even he doesn't mess with Qliphoth.
Right. The only people
Shadow Destroyer does, but he's a little nutso. But he also wants to be a king of Edom.
Right. So, yeah, he's got similar goals to Luther Black.
He's basically like a copy of Luther Black, it almost seems like. But
yeah, he's just kind of ripping him off.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, and there are other similar things to the Kings of Edom, even if they're not Kings of Edom, so there are powerful, quote-unquote, gods, but I'm pretty sure the 5 particular Kings of Edom, they all got trapped there, imprisoned there. They don't...
By Lords of the Jeweled Spider.
I think that is correct, yes.
Which you can also see Gadget Boy, actually, out of all the characters in the game, has some lore on that.
Really?
Yeah, he does. It's supposedly a video game in the Champions universe where you play as the Lords of the Jeweled Spider and you seal away the Kings of Edom.
No. And on that note, there is a ward against the Qliphothic energies, and this isn't the kind of thing you could use to just go in there. You couldn't use this, and it's in-game, it's mentioned a few times, which is the Crystal Spiders. And these are actually made in a very specific way.
That nobody knows how to do.
Right. There are, around the world, like, so, you know, there's probably a few real ones, and then there's ones that cultures have made in a sort of attempt to copy them. They might have a slightly similar effect, but it's not going to be the same. The actual, I'm pretty sure no one knows how to completely make them correctly in the same way that the Lords of the Jeweled Spider did. Because I don't think there'd be any way for them to know.
Right. I mean, you can get one on, I believe it's actually on, is it in Canada?
Yeah, you find one in Canada. The Viper engine has dropped, I think.
Right, and then you bring that to Dr. Silverback, and then that follows a little quest chain down in downtown.
Yeah.
And then it actually even goes further out into Lemuria from Monster Island. You can pick it up from Ironclad and bring it down to Lemuria, and it reacts with Qliphothic energy. But nobody knows how to make them anymore. So they're extremely rare.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to just find one.
Ow.
What did you do?
I just punched the table in anger at the Qliphoth. Okay. I'm sorry. I kind of threw you off there. Continue.
So, basically, the entire point is, we've spent all that sort of time, we sort of gave you a brief outline of what Qliphoth is. It's very hard to get into what it actually is, because the books don't get into it, the game doesn't really get into it, and it's all because it's supposed to be unknowable. It's supposed to be unknowable, it's supposed to be untouchable. The books don't get into it because the books are generated on being a hero, and heroes don't mess with that.
Right.
So there's no point in really getting into it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to know of things that sort of use it, higher-ranking demon members, the Elder Worms.
The Elder Worms worship entities that may or may not be the Kings of Edom.
The Bleak Ones in Lemuria.
Right.
They are also Qliphothic, or Qliphothic-oriented. Feasibly, even the Carcharodons, I think.
I'm not too sure on those. I haven't read the Book of the Destroyer for a while. I think they're detailed in there. I can't remember writing game either, so... But they're working with Shadow Destroyer, so I assume they have some loose connection to it.
Right, so then you have Shadow Destroyer, of course, you have Luther Black. The Shadow Colossi feasibly could be from Qliphoth, I don't know exactly.
I guess they're supposed to be.
The Trey Kings are sort of described as like little Qliphothic gangsters, which is horrifically different from what they are in the book, but...
Yeah, aren't they, what are they, like a...
They're like a Latino gang.
That's right, yeah.
Before a Bay book, and instead in Champions they are a gang of Qliphothic horrors.
Yeah.
So...
I really think we kind of summed it up in like the first 5 minutes when we just said don't use it. It's...
Yeah, seriously, do not use it.
I would honestly even say if you were using it for a villain,
Most villains don't even use it. Like, let's be real, the only two that really do are Shadow Destroyer and Luther Black.
Right. But I mean, I don't think, don't play people who are possessed by Qliphothic energy. Don't play people who are channeling it. don't play villains who are doing either of those things either, because it's just... People mishandle it, because they treat it very much like this Lovecraftian thing, where it's insane, tentacles, blah, blah, blah. That's not what it's like. It's similar in regards, but it's just... Honestly, I'm saying this because I'm kind of jaded about it, but it's been so overused and so used so badly in game.
Not just by people that are players, but also by Cryptic themselves.
They
went back and they sort of fixed it,
right,
when they were doing Demon Flame and Aftershock.
Aftershock spoiler, they've completely laid Qliphoth to rest now. I'm pretty sure they're just stepping back from that. That should be a sign that you as the players should do this too. Just the fact that they've dropped it. Just come on. I mean, it's not worth doing. But if you want replacements, I mean, we've done all this talk about why you shouldn't use it. Why don't we give them a little bit of, what can you use? Use the Netherworld. Yeah.
It's every hell that ever existed ever.
Right, and that's such a good one, just because everybody uses the Qliphoth like a hell, and it's like, well, why would you do that when there are... There's one of the four imaginal realms, the four main imaginal realms, that is just every single hell.
Ever. From any religion, from any source, whatever. They're all in there. That's what Netherworld is. Right. You have the shadow realms in the fairy.
Yeah, that's, again, especially if you're looking for some kind of darkness-themed thing, don't just jump to Qliphoth. Be like, the shadow realm of the fairy, that's realmed by the Shadow Queen, who is a shadow fairy, basically. But even then, think about places in real-world legends. I mean, Hades, Tartarus, any of those hells, they either exist in fairy or the Netherworld.
Or the Dreamscape in the Astral Realm.
Dreamtime. That's way... I mean, that's just a very strange... that's where dreams come from, basically. It's basically all your dreams. There's, it's crazy. I mean, that's an interesting one to use. I wouldn't say it's a direct replacement for what someone who's using Qliphothicc might want to use, but it's one of those ones you could use.
Right. It will maintain the same sort of weird, surreal... Because when you're in a dream, everything makes sense. But when you wake up...
It's like, whoa, that was weird. Why was I naked in front of these people? Whoa.
Exactly. So, those are just a couple examples.
There's also one specifically mentioned called Lithrome, which is a plane that a superheroine called Black Rose actually calls upon with lots of dark, mystical energies. There's not much more information given than that.
But that's a good example for make your own.
Right.
Make your own realm.
Definitely. There are millions of just small imaginal realms in between all the main ones in the Champions multiverse. Just tiny things like Death's Dominion, which isn't really an example of what you could use, but, it's just something that's there. There's all these small realms. I mean, there's probably a realm that is just literally the imaginal realm of darkness, where it's just, nighttime.
Yeah, so just...
Make something up.
Use your imagination. Yeah. Make something up. The multiverse and the Qliphothic Tree of Life and all that are very open to slotting stuff in.
Yeah,
so
the only thing that really isn't open is Qliphoth. That's also another reason. It's like the one of the few things in Champions lore that's just very adamant.
Yeah, it's not the only thing in the lore where it is very much like, this can never be good. Ever. It will always be bad. So, just look at that, take a look at it and be like, okay, is what I'm trying to do a heroic concept that uses negative things, and then be like...
It doesn't make sense, does it, really?
Yeah. There's the Netherworld, all this other stuff.
It's a negative thing, but not in the same way. Because Netherworld relies on Earth to exist.
Right, that's the big thing about the imaginal realms. They are imaginal. They rely on humans, or whatever realm that they're currently linked into. They rely on those to exist, unlike Qliphoth. Qliphoth will exist even if no human knew about it. But if everybody suddenly stopped, like, believing in heavens or hells or whatever, Elysium and the Netherworld would cease to exist. Because they rely on human belief.
They become part of the Qliphoth, they just decay.
Right. So, once again, linking back, you want to use the Qliphoth? Don't. Just don't.
Just stop, please. Come on.
If that's the only lesson you take from this, we've done our job. Is don't use Qliphoth.
Please.
Hater.
Yeah.
Don't use it. Alright, so this is going to be pretty short. That's pretty much it.
That's all we really needed to say. I think we got what little lore there is. I think we talked about it. I think we told you pretty clearly that just don't use it. I guess I should end saying that this is our opinion. You don't necessarily have to take this as law, but we are taking this.
We are drawing this
law.
from the books, from the game and from the books. You don't have to listen to us.
But
we would
I
appreciate it.
This is good advice. I mean, maybe I'm being arrogant because we are just fantastic people in general.
But you don't have to use it, but please consider it.
Please just think about it at least before you just immediately jump on the Qliphoth. Just think about the kind of thing we've said. It's useful. It's one of those things. I'm gonna go back to just don't use it.
Yeah. All right. So this has been Lorecast episode 1. What you know about Qliphoth haters?
It's nothing. Still
nothing. And next week, I don't know what we'll cover.
We a truck.